Okay, so we're gonna get super serious with your QL. Quickly, QL means quadratus lumborum. There's a lot to this muscle and we don't have time to cover it all, but just generally, it's super deep muscle in between your hips and your rib cage. If you wanna blow your mind, it's in front of your abs. Let that roll around and we'll explain it at the end of this video. But to stretch QL, if you're having some hinging to the side problems, some side bending problems, or if one of our therapists has said, hey, go watch the QL video, this is it, so welcome. All right, so to begin with, you might start in a kneeling position. You're gonna use your hands for this self-myofascial release of the QL. You're gonna put your fingers on top of your hips. So my fingers are oriented up like this, like I'm trying to climb around the ilium and dig deep into my back, yeah? So once you contact that connective tissue there, it's already probably gonna feel pretty tender. So from there, if you start to kind of move from side to side, you'll feel muscles that bulge into your fingers and almost like kick you out. So you're gonna have to wiggle in and just wiggle deeper and deeper, sinking in. Once you're into some sensitive stuff, start to side bend over onto your fingers on the side that you're working on. So in this case, I'm of course working on the right. You can take your other hand to support your fingers. And just looking at this from behind, I don't know if you can see my thumb is kind of hooked on my PSIS there, or the back ridge of my pelvis there. And I'm sinking in. My suggestion to you is to do this on one side, adding a little breath, hanging out for, I don't know, 30 seconds, a minute, following the release by getting deeper and deeper with your pressure, and then ease out of that. Take a deep breath and notice the difference in the side that you worked. Maybe even do some side bending and see if you feel freer going one way or the other. Just so I'm not imbalanced, I'm going to show you again. So on this side, finding the crest of the ilium, I'm in this tall kneeling position. I do have my toes tucked, if you can't see that, just to support myself a little bit more. And of course, you don't want to be back this direction in a flexion in the pelvis, flexion in the hips. You really want to get tall with this. It's going to take a second to wiggle your fingers into what's tender. Take your time. This is deep stuff. And then side bend over the side you're working, maybe using the opposite hand to guide your fingers or give your fingers support to get deeper. Breathe a little. Follow the release, getting deeper with your pressure. And then ease out after about 30 seconds to a minute and test. Okay, so that's our first little foray into releasing the quadratus lumborum and associated fascia. Another way you can work with QL is to come down to the ground, and if you don't have a lacrosse ball, you could use a tennis ball. Lacrosse ball is pretty intense, so a tennis ball might be less intense. But now we're going to just use that lacrosse ball, and you won't be able to see this because it's going to disappear from view, but the lacrosse ball is kind of in the same position where my fingers were. So I'll just kind of talk you through this, and then I'll give you more of a visual on this. But once you ease onto this, just add some breath. So I'm just trying to relax into the pressure. it's intense. You definitely don't want to be shoving that lacrosse ball into the 12th rib. So if you feel something on the rib side of the ball that's uncomfortable or super sensitive, just move. And none of this should be so intense that you're just having to tighten up because it's that intense. Think you want to vivify the fascia, you want to fluff it up through your pressure. So lighten up. You know, self-myofascial release doesn't have to be this like grueling process. But we're going to use the breath here to create some shear sensations in the connective tissue. So just once you're sunk in, add the breath. There's a lot of different movements we could do here, but we don't have time to cover all of that. And I might suggest maybe 5 really good deep abdominal breaths there. So to give you the visual, if I were to turn around, let me face this way. So the ball is above my pelvis, below the ribs, and really on the back. And you may have to kind of rotate to get deeper into the area you're looking for. And of course, repeat it on the other side. So, first thing we did was working with the hands, right? Side bending, breathing into that, wiggling in. Then a lacrosse ball. To amp it up even more, you could use a yoga block plus a lacrosse ball. So the way to work with that is similar to how you just did. So the lacrosse ball lies on the yoga block, and then you're just going to fold yourself carefully over the yoga block. Use your feet on the ground. You see this configuration I have, and this, you don't have to be this exact, right? I guess for me, my bottom knee is bent, my top knee is in the air, obviously, and my foot's on the ground. I have that there so I can kind of lift off, but then you can just slowly sink in. Whew, super intense. This would be like if you'd done those other things and got enough out of it, go with that. But if you've repeated those self-myofascial release several times with QL and you feel like there's still more to clear up, use the lacrosse ball and the yoga block. Same process, add some breathing. Any shear sensations you can create in there would be good for the connective tissue to create some release. Yeah, so it's a little bit of a whirlwind way to explain that, but you'll learn more as you experiment. Common faults are to get pressure coming up into the 12th rib a little too much, so if you feel that, back off. And another common fault is just to work too deep, too fast. This is sensitive tissue, super powerful muscles, and we don't need to just wail on it. Now we said QL was in front of the abs, so that's kind of an interesting thing to work with in your awareness. So the abdominal muscles in general come around and insert on fascia that inserts on, well, we could say the transverse processes of all the lumbar vertebrae. On the back of those abdominal muscles and associated fascia are those long tubular muscles along the spine. But in front of that is QL. So that's why we say that QL, very deep muscle, is in front of the abs. Yeah, so have fun with that and release QL and feel the differences in your side bending and in your breathing.